Hey 3D students, so your project is called Ceramic Gestural Hands, and a lot of the hand sculpture examples in this slideshow are created by high school students. So we've been spending some time learning how to create hands out of clay, specifically a thumb, pointer finger, and just thinking about how you would sculpt just a flat hand, right? So that was helping you get to know the different parts of a hand, thinking about the muscle structure. And we know that hands change depending on your age and your life experiences. So for our Ceramic Gestural Hands project, you're going to be forming a ceramic hand that's in a specific gesture. So our project objectives, we're creating and sculpting a gestural hand. The hand should be in some sort of expressive gesture, and we're really trying to go beyond the peace sign or the hang loose sign. We're using additive and subtractive processes to construct a hand and parts of the hand, because you're going to soon be watching a very important demo on how to construct a hand. You're still making observations of your own hand when you're constructing a proportional hand out of clay, because I'm going to remind you to use your own hand as a reference. We're using a variety of pottery tools to carve and sculpt the clay, and we're using excellent craftsmanship with managing the clay moisture, using pottery tools, and keeping the quality of the sculpture neat, right? We're trying to create a hand that looks human-like. Now your hand, you'll be glazing it or painting it. You will have a choice. So something to keep in mind is, yes, the hand needs to be hollowed out, specifically where the palm is. Now, when you see my demonstration, I'm not going to have you create a wrist such as this. The sculpture is pretty much going to end kind of like here. It's going to end right there. We're not going to see much of this part, but we do need to hollow out the hand. So that's something to keep in mind. And photo references are going to be so important for this project. You're going to need to really return to them, especially when you get to all these other little details. And these are just some past student work. And again, you'll be deciding if you want to glaze your hand or if you want to paint it. So something to keep in mind when you're constructing your hand is we're really looking at the proportions of the fingers and the hand, right? We want the fingers to be somewhat proportional. We're looking at the details of the fingers and the palm, right? We have these creases, these wrinkles, the fingernails, of course, and the overall gesture of the hand. So we have some requirements for your sculpture. Most of the 5 fingers should be visible, so sorry, no closed fists. The sculpture is going to end at the bottom of the palm, which is where the wrist begins. So we're not really forming the wrist for this. There's no specific height because it really depends on the gesture of your hand. The hand must be posed in a gestural form. It's showing some sort of movement. And the hand must include details such as nails, creases, even muscle structure, right? Think about the knuckles or what happens when you close and create those creases on your palm. And the hand should be realistic and proportional to your actual hands. We're not making a small sculpture here. Obviously, we know it's a sculpture. I'm not expecting your hand to be exactly the same as your real hand, but it should be somewhat proportional. So how do you start? Well, you need to figure out what gesture you want your hand to be in. So there is a slideshow that you have access to that has examples of expressive hands. Now you'll have only one hand that you're creating, but how can you make it look gestural? How can you make it look expressive, right? Another way to think of it is like this, right? Think of a dancer, right? How can you show flow with your hands, right? Ooh, ah, right? How can we show gesture? Can we do that? Can we do that? Right? How can you show gesture? If you can position your fingers in a weird way, right? You know, how can you show some sort of gesture with your fingers? So you're going to start with that. You're going to be taking reference photos. You'll need the help of your classmate or Miss J to take reference photos. You'll need at least 4 different views. So here was an example that I tried. Here was one view. I turned my hand different positions, and I really had to get creative. And again, I was trying some other expressive poses here, but really important that you have those reference photos, and we need photos of your hand from different viewpoints, which is why you need a friend to help you out. You're going to be using those reference photos and your own hand to create sketches to figure out the position for each joint and digit. This is going to make it so much easier when it's time to sculpt. And there is a separate video that demonstrates for you how to create those sketches. Again, you can create sketches just by thinking of your hand in terms of shapes. So it's actually not that complicated. I know this is not a drawing class, but sketching the hand is really going to help you out. It helps you get to know what you'll need to construct, also becoming more familiar with the gesture and the placement of the fingers and thumbs, because even if you're working on your sculpture, you're going to have to move your hand into that sculpture, into that gesture every single time, right? So it's good to have those reference photos as well as some sketches. Now, your hand will not be holding an object, but if you're really kind of stumped on how to create a gesture, pretend your hand is holding an object. And how do you start then? Well, you're going to be watching a video on how to construct, and you're going to have some guided notes to follow along with that video. But just like you had learned, think of your hand in terms of digits and proportions. Again, starting this way is a great way to think about all of those segments. And you're going to hear me later in your demonstration, but you're using a bit of subtractive processes, right? Such as taking a large chunk of clay and cutting away and then hollowing it out, and also doing some additive where you're taking pieces of clay and adding it to the surface. Your next steps are